We did a thing. We ended up stopping by PetSmart before this movie because we said, you know what, we're going to watch Secret Life of Pets. Let's go look at the dogs. His name is Buddy. He's 9 years old. She's always wanted a Boston Terrier, and we ended up adopting a Boston Terrier. You're our first dog together. You excited? He's tired. He's also shaking a little bit. He's a little nervous. What's going on? If you missed it, we ranked the best picture winners from the last 10 years. That is on the channel now. Today, it's Best Actor. Next weekend, Best Actress. But we're going to look back at the last 10 Best Actor winners, and I'm going to attempt to rank them. Now, frankly, this is tough. And I kind of like every winner on this list. You know, some of these categories, I've not been a fan of the winners, but Best Actor, it's rock solid. And so the performances you see near the bottom, it does not mean that I hate them. But I need to see your lists, and be patient with me. My throat hurts, allergy season, but at least it's spring. Not really, but it's warmer.
You sure about that?
Like I said, I need your lists, thoughts on my list. If you enjoy this, dropping a like helps it absolutely. But if you want to share it, that would be cool. Subscribe for more.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
At the bottom, I think a lot of people expected my list to go in this direction, but it's not for the reasons that you might think. So, first of all, don't tell my wife this. She's a big fan of Bohemian Rhapsody, and I find people that are huge fans of Queen in general mostly like the movie. I didn't survey 100 people. I'm just talking about friends and family. But everyone that I've talked to outside of the film bubble and space thoroughly enjoys this film. I think it was a hit with audience members. And so the fact that there's such a separation between how critics and a lot of people on film Twitter feel compared to fans is interesting for me. My simple reason for putting Rami Malek as Freddie Mercury a little lower is because I just like the other performances more. It's really nothing against what he did. Now, I could knock him down a little bit because he didn't do his own singing. I think there were parts where they mixed his voice in with the performance, but for the most part, you got somebody else doing the singing along with Freddie Mercury's voice, but that's not me saying he did a bad job. I genuinely liked his performance. Now, that year, if we're looking at the others nominated, Christian Bale as Dick Cheney, Bradley Cooper in A Star is Born, Willem Dafoe at Eternity's Gate, and Viggo Mortensen, I think a war would have broken out if Green Book won any more awards. Look, it's a weaker year for Best Actor. Absolutely. Would I choose someone like a Bradley Cooper? I thought his performance was extremely vulnerable. He's doing his own singing. Yes, it's a fictionalized role. I do believe Freddie Mercury being Freddie Mercury has a lot to do with that. But it's a weaker year for Best Actor, so the fact that Rami Malek wins that award, I didn't find his performance to be significantly below the other nominees. And to be honest with you, I'm perfectly fine that he was the choice. And so again, this, being intent, I just find these other performances to be stronger. They're bringing something else to the table that maybe he didn't. But at the end of the day, I think his performance is fine in a weaker year. It's okay.
The point of this course is to learn how to write clearly and persuasively. Think about that. Think about the truth of your argument.
Next up, I hate putting it this low on the list because I was really rooting for Brendan Fraser that year. He's not my choice within the nominees selected, but I was cool with it, not only because of the career, but also because I thought he was genuinely really good in The Whale. Now, I know it is a movie that has spawned plenty of memes. I get that. And maybe the film itself didn't quite nail it for people like they expected. That said, Aronofsky, he's not the type of filmmaker that makes a movie everyone is going to agree upon. And so I have a lot of friends in the industry that just hated that film altogether. And I didn't. I actually really responded to The Whale. I thought his performance was extremely vulnerable and real, grounded, even though there are parts of that film that are beyond reality in a way. But at the same time, I watch Fraser and I just see how he has grown so much as an actor, and the emotional vulnerability made for a great performance. Now, if I look at his performance compared to the other ones I'm going to talk about, again, I don't see maybe as much range as I do in some of these others, or just the shock factor like a Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. We'll talk about that. But I do believe he was really rock solid in The Whale. Another reason why he's maybe a little lower on my list is because I look at some of these other nominations here. Paul Mescal for After Sun, Colin Farrell, Banshees of Inisherin. You know, Austin Butler as Elvis. You could make that Rami Malek comparison. And while I prefer Bohemian Rhapsody as a movie, maybe Austin Butler was sinking into that performance just a bit more. And that's who it was down to that year. It was between Butler and Fraser. I'm coming in hot saying I think Colin Farrell gave the performance of that year in Banshees of Inisherin, at least within that nomination group. Paul Mescal shout out for After Sun. And so a much stronger group of nominees, a performance from Farrell that I thought was magnificent. All of that combines to push him down this list. But again, not mad at it.
What's going on? Everybody okay?
They got a call, said there was trouble in the house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You all need to look around?
Okay, I had a time with this next spot. Ultimately, I decided on something that I wasn't anticipating. I thought Will Smith in King Richard would be a little higher on this list. It's a great performance, and I feel like this is a win that is so overshadowed by the Chris Rock slap. Granted, great meme. Such a good meme for quite some time. People were on it that night. There were memes coming out 30 minutes after it happened. I look at this Will Smith performance and I feel like it's going to be lost in the shadows, even though it won him the Oscar because of what he went on to do during the ceremony. This is a really good performance. And, you know, the story of Venus and Serena is not one that I knew all that much about, but I knew the role that their father played in their lives, an unwavering commitment to his daughters, a love and a passion, obviously, but a belief instilled in them that allowed them to go on and be great. And I thought Will Smith conveyed that extremely well, and he was among my favorite performances of that year. When Oscar time came, I think he was actually my favorite choice to win it. Now, looking back, reflecting on how I feel about these films, and trying to put the slap to the side, I do believe Andrew Garfield's performance in Tick, Tick, Boom is a little more impressive, and I got a lot more moved emotionally the second time I watched that movie. You got a couple of powerhouse performances in there. Benedict Cumberbatch, The Power of the Dog, a hot topic that year. Denzel Washington, The Tragedy of Macbeth. I got to see him live in person at a Q&A, so obviously that's going to resonate with me. But at the end of the day, you know, this was a moment for Will Smith, slap aside. This was a moment for him to reflect on his entire career and the fact that he's had numerous performances that people say are awards worthy, finally delivering one that got him that coveted award, and no one really disagreed with him at least being in the conversation. Now, some people were definitely rooting for some of the others, but I don't look at this as a year where the wrong person won it, even though I was probably pulling for Garfield, because all of those performances are really strong, even though they're all in movies that maybe didn't finish in at least my personal top 5 of the year. A lot of people love Power of the Dog. So I think Will Smith gives a great performance, but some of these others above him on this list, just a little more emotionally memorable, and maybe in movies that I hold in higher regard.
If you could take one guy to an island with you and you knew you'd be safe because he was the best man, he was going to keep you happy, if it was between me and your father, who would you take?
My daddy.
All right, next up. I had a really hard time ranking this because I have always seen Casey Affleck as a really good actor, but there's something about each performance that he gives that feels similar to all of his others, if that makes sense. So I thought he was magnificent in Manchester by the Sea. And while I did still see Casey Affleck at times, there is a nuance to this performance that he's never really brought to a role before. And I was kind of astounded by him. Now, this was a strong year. If you look at the contenders here, Ryan Gosling, who was the one I was rooting for from La La Land, obviously, Andrew Garfield from Hacksaw Ridge, Viggo Mortensen, people forget about Captain Fantastic, and then Denzel Washington from Fences. So, this is a great year. And for Casey Affleck to beat out all of those others, you have to take that into account. I initially wanted to put Will Smith above him, but the more I thought about Manchester by the Sea and how devastating, and I mean devastating, Affleck's performance is here. A couple of standout scenes that just blow you. Every time they make their rounds on Twitter or X, man, I'm just like, he was really good. He was really good. And so, you know, it's hard because it's not a movie that I don't revisit just because of how freaking devastating and emotional it is. But I do feel his performance every time I watch those clips online. I've only ever watched the movie twice. I sound like a crazy person. Most people watch movies once, but I had to go back and kind of see if that performance, and it did. And the movie itself, it's a hard thing to watch. You're looking at Casey Affleck's range, and he's not a guy to showcase a ton of range, but within the confines of what I believe he can do, he probably did the best that he could do. And that's why it's so impressive. And that's why it's a little higher on this list than maybe I initially envisioned.
He stands for one thing, and one thing only, himself.
Why have I been forced to send for Churchill?
Next up, Gary Oldman from Darkest Hour. Gary Oldman playing Winston Churchill. Again, you play these real-life characters, real-life people. They're not characters. And so you have something to compare that performance off of. Now, not that I've seen a lot of clips of Winston Churchill or met the guy, but you have an idea as to who he is based on the history you know about him. And I thought, Gary Oldman encapsulated everything I expected this guy to be. The performance is magnificent, going hand in hand, just like Brendan Fraser, hand in hand with the makeup and hairstyling winner, and you see it, right? Brendan Fraser escaped into that role. You did not recognize him, but it's not a real guy, a real historical figure. Winston Churchill is. And so to see Gary Oldman just disappear like he did here, I'm so thoroughly impressed. And it's funny because, you know, he's such a good actor. It's not really the performance I go back to. I go back to his bigger Commissioner Gordons and Harry Potters and, you know, just the movies that made him the superstar that he is. But if I start to think about Darkest Hour, I'm like, no, that's in there in the conversation because how he was able to carry himself and the dynamic he has with some of these other top-tier actors in this movie it's phenomenal. Now, this was a phenomenal year. You've got Denzel in there, and what was that? Roman J. Israel. Well, that's fine. I mean, he's Denzel Washington. Daniel Day-Lewis in Phantom Thread. Timothy Chalamet in Call Me By Your Name. Daniel Kaluuya in Get Out, which is arguably the movie that has resonated most with people, wasn't even really in the conversation. I think a lot of people before the year started thought Daniel Day-Lewis was going to take home the award. So for Gary Oldman to finally cement his status and, you know, continue, it's like nothing he does in this film was out of the realm of possibility before I watched this movie. I knew he could do it, and he did it, and he crushed it. And so I can't be mad that he won, even though some of those other movies, resonate more. But I even thought Darkest Hour was a really good film. And so all in all, yeah, surprisingly, he's higher up on this list. All right, here we go. Joaquin Phoenix in Joker. Now listen, I got to be honest with you. Joker Folie à Deux, kind of... It's weird, man. I look back at the first Joker, and I loved it. It was so good. I was raving about it. It was one of those movies where my friends were texting me, and they usually don't watch... It's funny you say this about a movie like Joker. They usually don't watch artistic or more artsy films. Admittedly, Joker kind of was that, even though it was a Martin Scorsese ripoff and all of those things that people say. I didn't care. I loved it. It's obviously a movie for general audiences, but then it's one of those that resonates with a lot of people, and I thought Joaquin was outstanding. He was in the conversation with Heath Ledger for a little while, and then the sequel comes out, and it just kind of ruins your perspective. Now, I don't think the sequel is a film bad enough to taint everything about the first one. I don't think the sequel is bad enough to taint his performance in the first movie. And I go back to the first movie, and I'm like, no, this is as good as I remember. But now that the sequel has come out and just been such a huge disappointment across the board with fandom and obviously myself with what I rated it, I have no will to go back to the first one. And I see his performance in the second. He's still great, but the story is so bad and frankly empty that it makes me look back at his performance in the first movie and say, was it that good? I mean, it was, but was it? And so that's part of the reason, like, I love this, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me. That's fine. It's okay. We're allowed to disagree. But the Joker, the first one, is so great, and it is mostly because of Joaquin's performance. And a movie that mostly works because of one performance deserves to have that performance highlighted and elevated. And, you know, Joaquin did the unthinkable. He blew people away and was just as good as Heath Ledger. Now, I still stand by Heath as my favorite, but it's crazy that he is that good because he only had like 20-something minutes of screen time, whereas this Joker had the entire movie regardless. That's how strong Heath Ledger is. Now, that year was a weaker year. No one thought Jonathan Pryce or Antonio Banderas, no one thought they were going to win, frankly. Maybe some people did. Maybe you did. I didn't think that. But there are some good performances here. Leonardo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Brad Pitt was kind of the story that year, overshadowing Leo. Now, if I'm making an argument, I'm going to go for Adam Driver in Marriage Story. That performance blew me away. That performance was magical and wonderful, and if he would have won, I would have been very happy. Maybe he would have been higher on the list because of how the sequel tainted it. But I don't want to factor in the sequel all that much because we're focused on this performance and this win. I am human. I'm going to think about Folie à Deux, but I still love the first one. And that's why he cracks the top portion of my list. I gotta be honest. All right, you were wondering where he was. He's here. I should be talking about, well, that movie was further back. So, no, I'm not talking about Wolf of Wall Street. I wouldn't have been talking about it anyway because he didn't win. And I still stand by that being Leo's best performance ever. Frankly, his Oscar was overdue. I do believe that was part of him winning for The Revenant. But the other part of it is, if you look at the category, Eddie Redmayne wasn't going to win. Bryan Cranston wasn't going to win. Matt Damon in The Martian, I think there's an argument to be made there. He was amazing. And then Michael Fassbender as Steve Jobs, probably the biggest competition to Leo that year. But I still look at Leo's performance in The Revenant, even though it's not his best. This is a guy who has so many top-tier performances, it's even hard to put his Oscar win in the top 3 because he's that good in every movie he's in. It's just some years, maybe, there's somebody who's a little better. That's definitely debatable for some of those big-time losses. But my God, man, you go back and watch The Revenant, he is as good as you thought he was. Even though it's not his best performance, it doesn't matter. He's phenomenal in that film. And there's part of me while watching that movie that looks at Tom Hardy's performance and is a little more impressed with that, which could be why, you know, Leo's not in my top 3 here. But it doesn't matter because I expected it from Leo. I got it from Leo. You talk a raw and vulnerable performance. This guy goes through it in this movie. Obviously, the bear attack, that was the big focal point that year. But beyond that, just what he's having to deal with and the desperation and the sadness and the pain and the motivation to survive. I mean, I feel Leo's performance in The Revenant, and it's a movie I've seen 3 times. Every single time, those 2 main performances are what sticks out. Obviously, the direction's rock solid as well, but man, Leo knocked my socks off, and I don't want to underrate him, even though it's not his personal best, in a year that was maybe a little weaker. The field was weaker overall, but it doesn't matter because he's still phenomenal.
Cousin. There's him. He's alive.
All right. Now, some people are going to get on to me for this when they're going to say, but AI helped Adrien Brody win this Oscar. I don't think it did. If you actually research and go look at how AI assisted in the making of The Brutalist, it really didn't have a lot to do with the performance, at least the parts that I cared about, which is most of it, okay? There's a lot to be said about that. The debate online is interesting. But I thought Adrien Brody, in a great year for Best Actor. I mean, I look at some of the other nominees here. Coleman Domingo, Timothy Chalamet, You could even look at Ralph Fiennes and Sebastian Stan, who was like the underdog for me. I'm like, man, nobody's talking about him winning, but he's truly great as Donald Trump. I would call this a top 5 overall field over the last 10 years, and that's going to get some pushback from some people, but Coleman Domingo was my favorite performance of this year, and I still have Adrien Brody this high up on this list. So that's really impressive. And Chalamet was great. So it's one of those years you just have to admire what the winner was able to bring to the table. And Adrien Brody brought that to the table, man. It helps that it's a 3.5 hour movie. So you're spending a lot of time with me. I get that. But my God, man, Brody was so outstanding. I mean, genuinely outstanding. And you hit every single note, right? You start out with fear and admiration and joy that you're feeling in that opening scene because we finally made it. This is my chance to prove what I can do. But you're hitting every other level as the movie goes, to fear, to pain, suffering, anger when he hits that little stride, those sequences towards the end of the film where he's just so passionate about his work, man. And I felt that from Adrien Brody throughout this entire movie. And so you're going to get me saying I maybe preferred Domingo's performance, but I'm not going to argue with this victory, even though some people might. And The Brutalist is such a magnificent There Will Be Blood level epic that it is hard to look past what is arguably the best part of the movie, and that's Adrien Brody's performance. And so, I mean, genuinely a win, a deserving win that I was really happy about, and this is going to stun some people. Maybe it's recency bias, I'll admit that, but he's in my top 3.
Date of birth?
Friday, 31st of December, 1937.
You're living with your daughter at the moment?
Yes, until she goes to live in Paris.
Okay, voice is given out. We're going to make it through this. Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins in The Father. This one is hotly contested. And not because of Anthony Hopkins getting the victory, it's how they went about it during the ceremony. I don't know if you remember that, like building up to Chadwick Boseman getting this win and then ultimately giving it to Hopkins. I thought that was a little, all right, don't know about that. But I am of the mindset that Hopkins did deserve it. Now, I would have been happy with Boseman, a posthumous win, a great performance. He was great in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Gary Oldman was great in Mank. Stephen Yin was great in Minari. And Riz Ahmed, I mean, this is a really good category. But Anthony Hopkins, far above the rest, in my opinion. What he was able to do in The Father, conveying so many things at once with one performance. And by the time we get to the end of the movie, as an audience, we're seeing things from his perspective. And we are just as, unsure of where we are and what we're dealing with as our title character, who is, leading us in that direction. And Hopkins handling it all so well. But you feel so much building up, but this is a case where the destination is just as impactful as the journey, and the journey is tragic and heartbreaking. Having a grandmother who dealt with something very similar prior to her passing away. I watched this and I just felt for every character involved. Obviously Hopkins, but everyone else within the story, and how truly heartbreaking and tragic it is. But you then have that moment at the end where Hopkins is repeating what he repeats over and over again, and your heart just breaks even more. And, I got to give kudos to everyone involved with The Father, a phenomenal film, but ultimately, this is Anthony Hopkins. This is his performance. This is his state of devastation, the magnificent way that he goes about conveying this story via this script is it's so good. And you're watching a guy at the height of his powers. Hopkins accumulating all of the acting knowledge and experiences that he has over the years. And this maybe being the final time he's giving a performance on this level and just going for it. I felt it in every way. The Father is one of the best movies of that year, so that definitely helps. But he carried it on his shoulders. And that is why he's easily in the conversation for the best. And he would be the best if it wasn't for this guy right here.
This is a national emergency.
Detonator charged.
Cillian Murphy beating Paul Giamatti Two of my favorite movies of the year. There is an argument to be made for Jeffrey Wright as well. I thought American Fiction was great. But The Holdovers spoke to me on so many levels. Paul Giamatti is just amazing. And that relationship, that core dynamic in that film is part of what makes it work. And so to be trumped by a performance that is not only one of the best of that year, but easily one of the best of the decade. And Cillian Murphy carrying Oppenheimer, the character on his shoulders. I don't want to say he carries the film because there's a lot that goes into Oppenheimer that makes it great. This is an ensemble for the ages. This is direction for the ages. It's a script for the ages. And so there is a good argument to be made. Well, Austin, if all of those things contribute and are able to help Cillian Murphy, then why does he rise above the rest? Well, because Cillian puts the cherry on top and executes every single piece of dialogue to perfection and ultimately makes this movie what it is, man. Without Cillian, like, I see him as Oppenheimer, and there isn't a part of me that could ever see anyone else playing this character. He's not only that good, he is that impactful and creating something that becomes so ingrained into pop culture from a historical biopic that went on to make almost $1 billion. This movie still doesn't feel real to me. Oppenheimer doesn't feel like a real film. No one in a million years could have told me that there is a movie like this that almost made $1 billion 5 years ago, a little long 3 years ago, coming off of the pandemic, but it happened. Now, if you would have told me Christopher Nolan, I'd been like, yeah, there's a shot. And Nolan's got a lot to do with this, but Murphy is just everything that you needed him to be, to create an iconic character, to live in the world of memes, so many memes. It's like every line of dialogue at the end of the movie when he says, "I believe we did," that hits so hard, specifically because of the way he says it. And, you know, he's definitely a stoic character, but there are so many times where he showcases those emotions. The bleacher sequence, one of my favorites from the entire film, when he breaks down and Emily Blunt's there comforting him like, "It's okay, Robert, you bastard." It is and will forever be my number one from that year, but it is my number one of the last 10 years. Now, if this year comes along and gives us a performance that I would put above Cillian Murphy, we're talking one of the best years ever. Also, to celebrate this occasion, I had to pull it out. Not what you're thinking. It is the Cillian Murphy blanket. Wait, here we go. Look at that. Look at the Cillian. It's the blanket of Cillian Murphy's. Look at all of them. He's celebrating. Oh, Cillian, my Cillian. I want to apologize for that. Thank you all so much for watching. Would you like to see an actress list? Now, if you all enjoy this, please let me know, because we could go beyond just actor, best picture. I would like to do actress. We could look at supporting categories. I think this is really fun. But I also want to do a way too early Oscar predictions video. Now, I need you to let me know in the comments. Is it way too early? Or would that be kind of fun? And then next year we look back and see how wrong I inevitably am going to be. So thank you for watching this video. Appreciate it big time. Thanks for handling my scratchy voice. Hopefully, I feel better soon. I'll see you later.